Welcome to City Hall. I will call this meeting to order on the behalf of the Wichita City Council. Mayor Lily Wu, joined by Vice Mayor Maggie Ballard, Council Member Becky Tuttle, Council Member Brandon Johnson, Council Member Mike Hoheisel, Council Member Dalton Glasscock, and Council Member J.B. Johnston.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And first off, we want to thank our gracious host here at the City of Wichita for having all of us county folks come over and have a good discussion today. We'll talk a little bit more, some of our, they're not a panel, I don't want to call them a panel, but there's the public safety experts that we have in the room today, and we'll have a good conversation. Obviously, the city and the county, when we do public meetings, we have a little bit different approach to it in regards to protocol and things of sorts, so I'll walk us through what we do on the county side. Before we get into that, talking a little bit about the order of business today, obviously we're going to have a discussion on crime in the local justice system. Issues, innovative ideas. We want to hear from the data. There's three goals really in my mind today. The first really is just public awareness. It's hearing from the people on the ground, what's happening in your departments, what's happening in the community, data, things of sort that the public needs to understand and we need to understand in the public safety ecosystem. The second is, from a goal standpoint, is really innovative solutions. I've heard on several occasions, and I've quoted him on several occasions, our elected sheriffs say that we are not going to arrest ourselves out of some of the challenges that we have. I want to know what that means, and I want to know what creative solutions, innovative solutions, things we aren't doing that could be recommended. I want to delve into that concept a little bit more and invite that conversation. And lastly, I want to continue conversations in partnership. There is so much overlap in the public safety sectors between what the City of Wichita and the Sedgwick County government and these departments and what they do. It's incumbent on us to continue in partnership and conversation. So today is one of those efforts, many efforts, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion today. So with that being said, I'll officially call this meeting to order for Sedgwick County Government, October 25th, 2024. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Meitzner. Commissioner Dennis. Commissioner Howell. Commissioner Lopez. Present. Chairman Beatty.
Present. Next item.
New business, item A, discussion on crime in the local justice system issues.
Okay, I think the easiest route and what we're going to do here, we have several guests, and we'll allow you to introduce yourself kind of as we go. Just to give a brief 2-3 minute conversation, I would suggest that maybe we allow the presentations and then we'll have time afterwards to have questions and discussion each, but that way we can get through all the presentations in a timely manner. So if we just want to go in order, I think that'd be okay. Colonel, Sheriff Easter cannot be here today, but Colonel Brian White is here. And we'll start here and then we'll go from there to the DA. So Colonel, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. The sheriff sends his apologies for not being here today, but I'm glad to be here to talk to this group. It's great to have everyone here today, so thank you very much. Quickly go over a quick overview of the sheriff's office, and I'll touch on a few items. I've got a slide here at the end that talks about questions, but we may want to hold that until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. First of all, I want to talk about the detention facility. The detention facility has its lowest population in 20 years. I moved over from the Wichita Police Department to the Sheriff's Office about 6 years ago, and we were averaging 1,600 to 1,700 inmates in the facility, and now we're around 1,200, so that's 400 to 500 less inmates in the facility, so we've had quite a reduction there. Typically, the question that comes up as it relates to population are what are the contributing factors? Quite frankly, crime is down, and we'll talk a little bit about that in oncoming slides here, but that's one of the biggest contributing factors. One of the other contributing factors is how the district attorney's office is managing his office, and he'll talk about that here in a little bit. Individuals being placed into services instead of arrested for minor offenses. One of the biggest clients that we have is the Wichita Police Department, and they have had a lot of innovative ideas and strategies as it relates to managing how they have contact with people that they're arresting and some solutions that they have for that. And the Wichita Police Department has done a great job of kind of diverting folks to other services that are in our community that can help people identify solutions in their life that are different than jail services. One of the other things that we've done as it relates to servicing or helping people that are in our facility is, detention facility that is social services. So we've created 2 new positions within our staff to help identify how we help people integrate and move from the detention facility out into the community. And you see I have a number of things listed here. There are 10 different items. I won't go through them at length, but I'll kind of just mention some of them. Some people don't have their Social Security card, and sometimes that prevents them from connecting with services. So we want to get them their Social Security card. Housing and placement, food assistance, state identification. So this can be driver's license, identification cards. Again, this helps them get the services they need when they, day one, when they move from the facility out back into the community. I talked a little bit about crime, and I'll touch on that now. And I've got 2 different slides here. One is about violent crime and one is about property crimes. These are numbers that compare the first 10 months, or I'm sorry, the first 9 months of this year compared to last year to kind of give everyone an idea of how crime is trending right now. As you can see, robbery, homicide, arson, simple assaults are all down. We have some crime classifications that are up. As you can see here, aggravated assaults are up by just a little over 3%, so it's not a dramatic change from the previous year. But in general and overall, violent crime is down in the county. Property crimes. Theft is down, burglary is down, stolen property cases are down, larceny for motor vehicles are down, and motor vehicle theft is down. And again, the overall trend here is that property crimes are down. There is an uptick in a few areas here, but overall and generally speaking, property crimes are down as well. One of the questions that we get a lot is how staffing looks for the sheriff's office and what that looks like. And if we look back over the last several years, it's been a real challenge for the sheriff's office and law enforcement in general across this country. And I pulled out a few numbers here to kind of give you an idea. And I'll talk about it in a little bit more general terms here that I think will resonate with the group. If we look down here at detention facility, I'm going to skip down to the last bullet point where it talks about 2024, where we hired 87 detention deputies and we only lost 40 employees. And these are people that could retire. And some people from detention services are also interested in moving into a different law enforcement where they're a commissioned law enforcement officer. And so we encourage that kind of growth, but we don't want to see more people leaving than we see coming in. And if you look at bullet point number 1 in 2021 there, or the second bullet point, I'm sorry, we had 116 detention deputies, but we lost 127. So we were having more people going out the door than we had coming in. And I didn't put it on here, but I wanted to talk about it for just a moment. And that is when I came to the sheriff's office, within a few years, in detention, we had over 100 openings for detention deputies. I checked just before I came over here, and it's a little bit different than this slide here because this is a moving number almost weekly. But we start a new class on November 4th of 11 employees. We just graduated 12 last night, and we have 6 openings. So when you talk about having 100 openings and now we have 6, that's a dramatic change. And one of the biggest contributors to that was increasing base pay. That has made a big change in how we manage our employees coming and going from our organization. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and this is also a contributing factor today, is being able to maintain our staffing levels. And this is a robust health and wellness unit. We've spent a lot of time and effort over the last several years investing in our employees. And part of that is having a full-time therapist with our organization. This is one of our employees. This is number 4 on this list here. We just also added a master's level intern earlier this year that is helping with therapy services for our employees. And then we also moved one of our deputies into this unit that's part of the peer support team and mentoring program. We've trained over 62 of our employees as part of our peer support team. I am also part of that team and help with executive level peer support. So this has been something that, and we also track the usage of this service. We don't need to know who the employees are. It's important that this can be anonymous and that they can reach out to these services. But we do track the amount of services that are reached out, that our employees reach out to. So this has been a game changer for us. Last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was the fentanyl crisis in our community. I didn't want to leave this podium without touching on this because this is a crisis for our community. I'll talk a little bit about bullet point number 2 here, which is the fact that Sedgwick County is down 17% in overdose deaths. This is a statistic that the CDC tracks. And what we are seeing is that again, deaths are being reduced, but Narcan is more accessible in our community. That doesn't necessarily track directly with the amount of people that we see as it relates to usage or access to this drug. So this is something that we have to continue to be mindful of. Even though we see the deaths being reduced here, it doesn't mean that it is still not something that we need to be very mindful of. I'll touch on a couple points here real quick. There are other drugs that are moving into our community that have already touched other parts of the community, mostly on the coast, and that's xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer. It is not a narcotic and cannot be affected by Narcan. So it's a dangerous drug that we need to monitor and be mindful of that is moving into our community. These are the main points that I wanted to cover today. I can stand for questions now, or I know we've got a lot of people that have presentations coming after me, but I'd be happy to answer questions now, or I can have a seat and field those questions.
Colonel, thanks for the presentation. I think we'll have everybody go through, then we'll have a time to talk more collectively with questions. So hang tight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up, our District Attorney, Mark Bennett.
So we'll start with some statistics. Homicides during pre-COVID, we'll just say pre-COVID at the bottom number, we had 80 active homicides pending in February of 2020, just before the COVID crisis hit. You can see over the course of the next 3-4 years how that number rose. And it may only seem like 40 or 50 cases, but let me tell you, that is has a devastating impact on my attorneys, because each one of those requires at least 1, if not 2 attorneys to be involved in it. Each one requires weeks worth of work to resolve. So you're taking 10, 15 lawyers and giving them twice as much work, essentially. And these are typically the folks who handle these higher level cases are also going to be our supervisors. And so they went through a lot in the last 3-4 years. But as you can tell, the numbers are going down. We are at or near, below, in fact, pre-COVID levels. I would attribute that to a couple of things. One, the homicide rate in Wichita has gone back to pre-COVID levels, which is huge. Number 2, our courts stayed open throughout the COVID crisis. There were many major jurisdictions around the United States that effectively shut down completely for a year or 2 while COVID was going on. We slowed down. We shut down for, I don't know, a month and a half, 2 months, maybe. But by Labor Day that year, Memorial Day, excuse me, we were back and going, and by Labor Day, we were trying cases again. So that helped. In addition, I reached out to the defense bar and asked for volunteers or help if anybody was willing to take on homicide cases explicitly. And there was a group of attorneys here in downtown Wichita, defense attorneys, who were willing to do that. And they took on this homicide project where they take 2 or 3 at a time, never get overwhelmed, but they devote themselves entirely to these homicides, get them tried, and move on to the next one. Rather than having 20 or 30 on their docket, they have 1 or 2 or 3, so they can focus on it, get it tried, get it resolved, and move on to the next one. And these are the things that I think have contributed to this number getting to be a more manageable pace. Low-level property and drug crime possessions, also, they began to back up during COVID because we didn't have enough lawyers to give them to. And I don't mean in my office, we managed in my office, but I mean in the defense bar. There were not enough people practicing law in Wichita willing to take on criminal defense cases. And so we put them on a stack in our charging unit to literally stack up over the course of about a year. When that number got up into the 700s, we looked at each other and said, you know, this is not sustainable. We've got to do something. So we came up with this resolution docket. We call it the RD docket. And from January of 23 through, and we had different things I could unpack this for the rest of the afternoon, this project. But suffice to say, from the fall of 2020 through January of 23, we had a sort of an ad hoc throw everything we had against it to make it work. But over the time, we came up with a project with a different defense attorney firm here in town who were willing to take these on. And from January through October of this year, January of 23 through October of this year, there have been 1,559 cases that have been handled and processed through that docket. 78% of them have reached a resolution on that docket, and it's front-loaded with all the discovery going into effect. We provide it to the attorney even before they meet their client. They've had a chance to go through it before they see their client for the first time, and they're resolving these cases in a week or two rather than months or years. And I will also say, too, for those who would say, well, it seems like a rush to judgment, 22% of the people who come and go, oh, I don't want to do that. I want a trial. Okay, then go on to the trial docket. You're certainly welcome to do that. But there's a whole lot of folks who want to come in and say, I did what I did, I want the best deal I can get, and I don't want to have to come back to court 40 times. When this is resolved, it takes cops, keeps them on the street rather than sitting in my hallways waiting for their turn to testify. It keeps victims from having to come to court 5, 10 times. That sort of thing. So it's been a real benefit, and that's another thing that is, I think, contributed. I'm talking to the sheriff. He believes that these two events, the projects that we've worked on have impacted positively the jail population currently. There's one other that Brian mentioned. Colonel White said the first-time PV docket, it's in its infancy, but we started having all first-time probation violators handled by one judge per week. Instead of, I'm assigned to Judge Howell, and I'll get on his docket in 6 weeks, and I might sit and wait for my docket date to come up. Instead, we're getting them through right off that first week, getting them in and out, and it's too soon to say how successful it's been, but even anecdotally, it keeps people processed through and gets them back to their lives, and they're either going to be successful or they're not, but sitting in custody for a week, for another month or two, is going to help them. So that's another thing that's contributed, I think, to the lower jail numbers. Future concerns, because that was one of the things I was asked to address here. What things, if I'm a city council member, a county commission member, what things do I think you need to know about in the future? These are both may seem at first blush a little mundane, not really very sexy, but they're issues to me, and I think they're issues that we need to address. One is the shortage of lawyers. Regionally, there are, at least as of the end of 2022, and this is coming from the Kansas Supreme Court's Rural Justice Initiative. You can look it up on their website. All of this is taken directly from their website. There were, at the end of 22, 7,980 active lawyers in Kansas, 80% of which were in urban areas, which translates to Kansas City, and the metro area up there, and Wichita. 65% of them are in northeast Kansas. That means Wyandotte, Johnson, Leavenworth, Douglas, and Shawnee County. 65% of all lawyers in the state of Kansas are in those 5 counties. We have 15% down here, so you add us to that, and it's 80%, which means the other 99 counties in the state are squabbling over 20% of the lawyers. In addition, 29% of the urban lawyers are 60 years of age or older, and another almost 40% of the rural lawyers are. So, roughly, 2 years ago, about 1,800 of lawyers out of that 7,900 were 60 years of age or older, which means we've got a lot of folks going to be retiring soon. Here's the issue. The website listed in September of 24, just last month, they always congratulate. Here are the lawyers and their names and their addresses, or at least by county that they live in, that have passed the bar and are being added to the bar. Well, in September, there were 105 new lawyers with Kansas addresses added to the rolls. 12 had a Sedgwick County residence as their address, and 39 were in Johnson County. In April, last spring, because we passed the bar twice in Kansas, as we do everywhere else in the country, you take the bar in February, and then if you pass it, you're added in April, and you take it in August, you're added in September. there were 25, 2 from Sedgwick County, 8 from JOCO. So assuming we add, let's just say that holds true across 10 years, you know, we're adding somewhere in the neighborhood of 130 people to the bar rolls annually in the state, 1,300 lawyers across 10 years. Again, these are rough estimates here. I'm just using their numbers. But there's about 1,800 that you think would probably retire if they're 60 years of age or older in that same period of time, which means we are, to Brian's point a moment ago, he was losing more people 3 years ago than he was putting on the rolls as his employees. We are doing that with lawyers. We do not have enough who are willing to be, enough folks coming on to be lawyers in the state of Kansas. And certainly don't have enough outside of the Northeast Kansas corridor, from Topeka to Kansas City. And so it's tough to recruit down here. It's tough to keep people down here who want to do law. It's even more tough, more difficult when you say, by the way, come over and work with me handling tough, you know, criminal cases with all the low stress, high pay, and all the friends you make. Boy, that was supposed to get a laugh. Sorry, it's a tough crowd. Point is, it's tough work. It's you don't get paid as much as you would in private practice. And, you know, when law school's 20, 25 grand a year, and you're coming out, and that's before living expense. That's just tuition. It's a tough thing to try to get people to come into public service, either as prosecutors or defense attorneys, public defenders, et cetera. I'm speaking on behalf of the criminal justice system writ large, not just my office. Discovery. The proliferation of digital discovery has, I think everybody's aware of this generally speaking, but it is having an impact. Surveillance cameras. There was a time when if a cop came over and said, we happened to catch the crime on the quick trip video camera, I thought, man, that's awesome. How cool is that? Now, when the cops come over, it's like, show me the video. I mean, I just assume there's a video of the crime because 90% of the time there is. Body-worn cameras, dash cameras, cell phone downloads are just tremendous. Your cell phone today has more digital capacity, more memory, more everything than NASA had when they sent a man to the moon. And when we download those things, we're getting terabytes of information that someone has to review. The quick anecdote about that is we had a case recently where there was a group of people who had had a lot of contact with law enforcement, and the defendant was accused of a particular crime. And the cops went out, made the case, detective worked the case, presented everything that had to do with that case to our office. We provided it to the defense attorney. We were set for trial. And in the middle of the trial, the mother of one of the victims said something about, well, the last time the cops were out, I told them about this. And we're like, what are you talking about? Cops have been out to the house half a dozen times in the previous 2 years. The one that she was talking about was a false alarm case. They went out there and it was listed as a false alarm. So the detective who worked the sex crimes case looked at that and went, okay, that's irrelevant. Didn't go back and watch hours of Axon video of the interaction between people in the apartment complex, and didn't, you know, and if they had spent hours in real time watching that, they might have caught the fact that there was a comment made about it that might have been germane to a case that hadn't yet happened. If you're not tracking with me, that's the point. There's a hell of a lot for a detective to try to do and to try to divine what is and is not going to be relevant. And the bottom line is we need, I cannot look at the chief or the sheriff or the chief of Derby or Goddard or any other law enforcement agency and say, you guys need to do a better job. I'm asking for the impossible. So, final slide, what do we need? How do we address these? What are these innovative ideas? One of them is, and Commissioner Beatty and I've talked about this at length, I believe, personally, and I speak for me and me alone on this, we need the presence, I say presence, and I italicize that, presence of a law school in South Central Kansas. You're not going to get people in South Central Kansas who might be inclined to go back to law school, who, you know, went through and maybe they're a couple years out of college and like, you know what, I'd like to do this. To move to Lawrence or Topeka for 3 years and come back later. We have a 3-year anywhere program that Washburn's doing, and there's some good things going on there. But, and I'm not suggesting that Wichita State or anyone else, friends, anybody else, start up a brand new law school here. It would be impossible to do. But we could have the presence of one of the other law schools, and that's a conversation that's worth having. I'm not going to blow it out here. I wouldn't have time. Number two, as to the discovery, we need to look at either innovation through AI, and I don't think, I say either, it's an and, innovation and, not just one or the other. And additional FTEs, there's an example out of, I believe it's Flagstaff. They were having trouble keeping detectives. They have not enough cops on the street, and so when a detective makes the detective ranks, and after a year decides to take the sergeant's exam, they need the sergeants on the street, so they send them out. Meanwhile, they're just turning over detectives. So what Flagstaff did is they hired civilian employees to work in the police department, and I believe maybe in the DA's office, and their job is to be a crime analyst, and they come in and they review everything, and they do the backup for the detective who's out interviewing suspects and picking up shell casings and all the other kind of stuff that a certified law enforcement officer does, but a civilian, a permanent civilian staff to do that sort of thing, whether that's housed in my office, the sheriff's office, the police department, or some combination thereof, or these two entities here in front of me get your heads together and decide you're going to work together and put one together that serves all three entities. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is there's more than one person can do, than one detective or one ADA can do in handling this. So these are the big issues I see coming in the next 10 years, and we're going to have to address them. So I believe that's it. Thanks.
Mark, thank you. Appreciate that. Next up, from the 18th Judicial District Court, Chief Judge Gearing. And I think our court administrators here as well, Joni Wilson.
Excuse me. Well, I'm Judge Gearing. This is my court administrator, Joni Wilson. Joni's going to do that part of the presentation that talks about the challenges because she's smarter on that than I am. I can tell you sort of the progress that we've made in the last couple of years. Probably the biggest thing that happened to the 18th Judicial District was that we finally got new judge positions. We went probably 15 years in the dark without any new judge positions. In 2022, we had 2 new district judge positions added, and we had a magistrate for the first time added. Those judges went through the elections of 2022. They were sworn in January of 2023. That manpower that we got in 2023 allowed us to establish the resolution docket that Mark talked about. It allowed us to establish the Veterans Treatment Court that we put into place, that we're trying to get customers in. It's a little hard to figure out who's qualified for that program, but the longer we do it, the better we get at it. And so we've got that up and running. And so it has taken a little time, but the county is finally, we're in the finishing stages of new courtrooms to add all these new people. So we have space to run these dockets and space to do the things that the citizens expect the court to do. Going forward, though, we have some challenges. And Joni, why don't you tell us what the challenges are?
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, everyone. We've identified 3 challenges that district court is facing in the criminal department. I'm going to start with electronic PSIs, which are pre-sentence investigation reports. Our PSI department, which consists of 6 full-time writers and 2 part-time writers for these reports, completed 1,559 PSIs last year. They're assigned for defendants convicted of felonies. The Kansas Sentencing Commission developed an electronic PSI system, which, if it works, like I think they have intended, that would automatically fill a journal entry, which would give real-time statistics on sentencing decisions. We have been working in this system and are coming into many challenges that we estimate would take the PSI completion from 6 weeks to 12 weeks, which really doesn't work for our size of court. So that is one of the challenges we face right now, and our presiding judge is currently working with our PSI department to identify the issues to see if those can be corrected. And, you know, when you only have 6 PSI full-time writers, it gets to be a challenge when that system is slowed down as much as this would do. The next issue that we've discussed with the Sheriff's Department is professional visitation with attorneys with their clients that are in the jail. That process can be slow to bring the defendants up to speak with their attorneys. And we definitely need to see improvement in that area. And also in conjunction with that, we need to review ways for non-attorney staff to review evidence with the client in a manner that won't violate the sheriff's existing security protocols. So that is also in the work. Lastly, kind of echoing what DA Bennett spoke about the attorney shortage, we experience a shortage of attorneys who are qualified to handle off-grid cases and severity level 1 through 4 cases. There are requirements through the Kansas administrative regs of what experience those attorneys need to have to represent counsel. So we utilized funding through bids, the Board of Indigent Defense, to offer second chair opportunities for attorneys that don't have the qualifications. So they sit in court. The defendant is represented by a qualified attorney. This attorney then gains the experience to be able to represent these defendants on their own in the future. This is huge. I believe at one point we had maybe a handful of attorneys qualified to represent those defendants. So we, I guess, seriously want to take the opportunity to thank the departments that we work for the collaboration on the resolution docket, the county commissioners for giving us additional funding for things like raising our jury fees, which we recently did too, which we hope will also make it better for our jurors that come in to serve. Thank you.
Just in closing, I want to emphasize that the court in Sedgwick County in the 18th, we are blessed with good working relationships with the DA's office. We're blessed with good working relationships with the sheriff's office, with the public defender's office. When you have those productive relationships with these stakeholders, it makes the job of delivering the product that we have to deliver so much easier. So a big shout out to the people that we work with.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Judge. Joni, thank you. Appreciate that update. Next up, Regional Forensic Science Center. Dr. Shelley Stedman can't be with us today, but we have Robert Hansen.
Hello. I'm Robert Hansen from the Regional Forensic Science Center, speaking on behalf of Dr. Stedman, who can't make it here today. Some of our improvements that we've had over the last year include we have a fully staffed drug ID unit, which is allowing us to improve on our backlog. We were able to secure a CDC grant through the OD2A program, which is the Overdose to Action program. And this is funding a full-time employee for 5 years. We're currently 1 year into that program. Also, from the drug ID unit, we take some of those staff members and train them to be fire debris scientists, but unfortunately we lost 2 drug chemists last year, but luckily we were able to train 2 new ones who are now fully trained, and we were able to reinstitute our fire debris analysis program. We were also able to recruit back a full-time and already trained, fully trained firearms examiner who we trained in-house and then left, and then we were able to recruit her back here several months ago. So now we're fully staffed in that section as well. So we're able to meet the needs for that type of analysis. Also for DNA, we were able to fully train our last 2 people earlier this year. So now they are fully staffed and we have no backlog in that section currently. We're also lucky enough to be fully staffed in toxicology, and we're able to chip away at the backlog over the course of the last year. We're still performing a lot of validations on instruments that we need to finish, and then we will be in good shape in that laboratory. And lastly, I have the CDC overdose deaths are trending slightly down according to the CDC, and it's consistent with our metrics. We were just in a meeting earlier this week with the DEA, and they quantitate their fentanyl pills, and they're noticing that the trend of the concentration of fentanyl in the pills that they're seeing is getting less. So they're not quite as potent as they once were, according to their laboratory. Some of the challenges we have is with the drug ID laboratory, the backlog. It was about 1,200 to 1,300 cases earlier this year. We're down to about 900 now, which is still too high, but we're able to use that last full-time analyst to help chip away with that. But the problem is that the grant runs out in, 4 years from now. So if we don't get a full-time position for that drug chemist, we'll be back to where we were previous to that. And then also we have some challenges with our infrastructure with the building and the workflow, because we're utilizing some spaces that weren't necessarily originally designed for laboratories, but we're using them for laboratories. But those new construction plans or new plans are underway with the architects and facilities to take care of that workflow issue.
Okay, very good. Rob, thank you. Lots of questions coming later, I'm sure. So, next up, Department of Corrections, Steve Stonehouse.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Stonehouse, the Director of the Department of Corrections. I'm going to give you an overview of juvenile services and adult services in community corrections. And then Lori Gibbs, who is the Deputy Director of Adult Programs, is going to follow up with a conversation that we started about a month ago in a staff meeting about some outcomes for adults on supervision and some of the reasons that they're being revoked and new charges they commit while they're on supervision. So I'll start with the juvenile services. We serve kids between the ages of 10 and 23 in the juvenile services. We operate a juvenile detention facility, a residential facility, which is an unlocked program, a community-based program. It's less costly, it's community-based, it's more contact with their schools. So kids who the court orders to be out of the home, but they don't need to be in detention, can go over to the residential facility. And then we offer home-based services, which is like a pretrial program for kids waiting for court. And then we have juvenile field services, which is probation and parole for this group of individuals. Something that we're facing in community corrections for juvenile offenders is that this is 100% a community-based program. There are no out-of-home placements that some of us might think about 10 or 20 years ago, where we would send somebody to a group home or a boys ranch or things like that. That does not exist in Kansas anymore. So what we're finding is a true lack of appropriate community-based programs to meet the severity of the kids' mental health, substance abuse issues, and family dysfunction. So there's a disconnect. The state of Kansas does allocate quite a bit of money to Sedgwick County, but to be completely honest, we've not had providers step forward to take up that call to serve these kids in the community. So that's the disconnect. So if we're not going to have a residential placement program and we're not going to have community-based services, that's a disconnect in our program. So that's something that I know the county commissioner is very aware of it, and we've lobbied the legislature consistently about it, but it remains a challenge for us. One other thing about the juvenile population, there's a subpopulation of kids who are both children in need of care and kids who are juvenile offenders. So they've have contact with DCF because something going on in their life or in their family, and then or before they commit a crime or come in contact with us for a juvenile offender offense. These kids are increasingly difficult to serve in the community. DCF has the primary responsibility for placing these kids, finding some place for them to live. And we the way the system's set up today, would have to provide that supervision. So they're challenging. We've worked with WPD and the Sheriff's Office on this group of kids because we're not very good at it. They are very unstable, and we're not doing a good job of stepping into their life in a way that helps them become stable. So that's one positive thing about the juvenile justice system. I don't want to just be all negative, is that the state of Kansas Medicaid program has changed, and now kids are eligible for Medicaid 30 days before their release from detention. So we can start working with kids and their families to identify those kids who qualify for Medicaid so they can have it when they get out of the facility, to be able to start services when they get home. So that's huge. That's something that we've been working on for quite a while. In the adult services, you've heard bits and pieces of this before me, and that is staffing. Court services, community corrections, and parole essentially compete for the same group of individuals to be probation officers. There's a consistent wage war, bidding war for our salaries. So during the pandemic, we lost close to 20 trained staff members to be court services officers when they significantly raised their pay. The county followed suit, and then parole followed suit. So we do have difficulty in maintaining consistent, stable staffing when people are consistently, rightly, looking for better wages. So that is a challenge. Something unique to community corrections is that we are a subcontractor for the Kansas Department of Corrections. So before somebody can have a caseload, they need to be fully trained in a cadre of assessment tools. The last person we hired will not be trained for 9 months. She cannot take a caseload for 9 months. So we hired somebody, but essentially they can't do their job. So that is particularly difficult to manage when the level of clients, you also heard from folks that the numbers are down for us as well, but the severity of the individuals that we're serving is greater than we've ever seen before, related to substance abuse and mental health issues. That's for the juveniles and adults. So not having staff who can hit the ground running in a relatively short period of time upon hire puts an extra strain on all of our capacity to serve these folks. So now Lori Gibbs is going to give a brief overview on what happens when folks are on community corrections and it doesn't quite work out.
It works out a lot of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. So as Steve mentioned, we had the opportunity to present our state fiscal year 24 year-end report to the commission about a month ago, and there were some additional information that we were asked to provide, and I've provided everybody with a handout that looks like this, and I'll run through this quickly. Our successful completion rate in state fiscal year 24 was 55%. That was a 3% improvement over the previous year. It's a number that has stayed relatively stable for us over the last 10 years. The highest successful completion rate that I've seen in my tenure was 63%, and that was during COVID, when a lot of our services and our contact with clients had been reduced. So we had a revocation rate of 45%, and those revocations were comprised of 3 categories of closure types. The first one is for condition violators, and a condition violator is anything that's not a new crime. So it can be repeated drug use, it could be absconding, it could be failure to attend treatment, a variety of things. So our condition violation rate was 40% of the total revocation number. Then we had a 10% closure for new misdemeanors, and then the number that was concerning to commissioners when we presented a month ago involved our new felonies. So our new felonies consisted of both non-person and person felonies. Non-person felonies were 56% of our total new felonies, and then person felonies were 44%. So the two tables that you see here outline the alleged non-person offenses and the alleged person offenses. And the reason I say alleged is that when we close a case for KDOC, we are not closing it based on whether or not a conviction has happened. We are closing a case based on what's alleged in the warrant. So if the warrant alleges that a client has committed a new offense, then our closure type will tie to that particular closure. So either it's revoked condition, revoked new misdemeanor, revoked new felony as alleged. So again, they don't have to have been convicted. And to date, 47% of those new felony cases have not been charged with the alleged offense. So the two tables, as I mentioned, just provide an overview of what those non-person offenses and person offenses look like. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Steve, Laura, thank you very much. Mayor?
Well, thank you very much for our Sedgwick County partners. Appreciate it. Now we have 3 speakers from the city side. Again, really appreciate the opportunity to have the second en banc of 2024. This one centered around public safety because that is the #1 concern that we hear from residents. And it is something that we want community to have the topic top of mind, but also what are the solutions towards public safety. That is not just one entity, but as we've seen just so far, it's multiple different entities that are involved in that public safety. And on the city side, we have 3 individuals who will speak on the behalf. We'll start off with Wichita Police Chief Joe Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give you a quick overview of the status of the Wichita Police Department. This is our mission statement, working in partnership with our community to deliver exceptional police services with professionalism and fairness. Our goals is to enhance community engagement, reduce violent crime, and leverage technology to do so. And we'll explain how we've been doing all of these things. Quick overview, we're authorized for 707 commissioned law enforcement positions, 210 professional staff. Our operating budget for 2025 is $130 million. And we serve a population of almost 400,000. The structure is the chief's office. There are certain units that report directly to me, most importantly, the Professional Standards Bureau. And that was a very important change that I made in terms of accountability. Field Service Division, which is basically patrol, but it will also include our real-time information center that is currently under construction, investigation, and support services. Just some crime statistics. We're having some success with violent crime. We're having some challenges with property crime. In terms of non-fatal shootings, they are down 24% for the 5-year average. Thankfully, rape is down significantly, and we are having a good year with homicide, and we hope that continues. Property crime, as you can see, we are seeing some extreme challenges with shoplifting. Residential burglary is down, but auto theft is up significantly. Now, in response to that, we have enacted a multi-jurisdiction property crimes task force, which the Sheriff's Department is a part of. We're just 2 weeks into it, and we've recovered about $500,000 worth of stolen property. We have made 38 felony arrests and 29 misdemeanor arrests. There'll be more specific information on that at the mayor's press conference next week on Thursday. But in the short time that we have been in operation, we have seen significant success. And again, it's multi-jurisdiction, so we're getting the support of the Sheriff's Department and several of other agencies in Sedgwick County, but also this would not be possible with a lot of logistical support from the private sector to make this possible. The Wichita Animal Shelter, that is an important part of what we do. We recently did a press conference on this, but the important numbers there you can see in terms of euthanasia. There are certain legal requirements that we have by the state that we must follow. And the vast majority of the animals that we do have to submit to euthanasia euthanasia is to remain in compliance with those laws. Beyond that, you take those animals out of there, we are under 10%, and we would continue to bring that number down. We are making some significant changes in the structure of the animal shelter. We're hiring 2 professional staff positions so we can bring in expertise in that area. We are making our kennel staff positions full-time so that we can attract more people to take those positions because we're currently short there. And we're going to make it less costly for people to come in and to recover their animals if they are in our possession. And these are some of the areas in which we coordinate with Sedgwick County, obviously through 911. Our great District Attorney, Mark Bennett, in charging the arrest process and all of the cooperation we get from our Sheriff's Department and the courts in Sedgwick County. And also, can't say it enough, we have a fantastic relationship with the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Department, and these are just some of the areas in which we work together. Our EMCU unit, our SWAT team, narcotics, and our recently enacted alert protocol so that we have a coordinated way to make sure that we respond appropriately whenever there's a discharge of firearm by law enforcement in Sedgwick County. Also, our relationship with ICT-1 and ComCare. I think this program has been a huge success. When I came here, there was 1 team. We've added 4 additional teams with the help of ComCare. Right now, they're either at or just below their goal of being able to treat 60% of all cases on scene. And we have recently, in conversations with Malachi, he has informed us that the teams without an officer would like one, and we have applied for a grant to fund 4 police officer positions to add them to the current teams. This will actually save me manpower because now we have to dispatch at least 2 units with ICT-1. This way they'll have a police officer with them full-time. We are also working with the Police and Fire Foundation to get them ballistic protection. So this is just some of the training that the department has gone through recently, active bystandership for law enforcement. This deals specifically with teaching officers that not only do they have a duty to intervene, but they have a duty to report. And this paired well with ICAT, Integrated Communication Assessment and Tactics. This is probably, I consider to be the best de-escalation training that is out there right now. And the important thing about those 2 is that everyone in the department, including myself, has gone through those trainings. The Anti-Defamation League came in. I had a fantastic relationship with them in Philadelphia, and I asked them to come here and give training to our personnel in the identification of hate crimes and in conducting hate crime investigations. And also recently, and we are going to bring this gentleman back, we had the gentleman who was the commanding officer of the Rampart Division when the Rampart scandal took place in LAPD. And that might sound a little bit unusual, but it's a very heart-tugging presentation on how that could have all been prevented if he himself, as well as his supervisors, had paid attention to the little things and addressed those problems when they were small instead of allowing them to turn into what it did. Extremely well received by all of our commanders and supervisors, so we're going to bring it back for our officers who are in the special units and are in units that can be considered somewhat high risk. As I promised everyone when I came here, my goal was to make sure that when you were done with me or I was ready to move on, that you would have a pool of applicants to choose from for the next chief. And these are just some of the trainings that we're currently involved in to develop our senior staff. The Police Executive Leadership Program, Deputy Commissioner Duff recently graduated from that. It's an extremely prestigious program. You must be a deputy of a large organization to even participate in that program. Captain Bartell, who commands our Professional Standards Bureau, just graduated from the FBI National Academy. We have Captain Lemons, who was away and participating in a 6-month FBI fellowship. When he returns, he will be a subject matter expert in active shooter. And we are utilizing the FBI LEADA program for our sergeants and lieutenants to prepare them for greater responsibility, as well as the School of Police Supervision and Command. Deputy Duff is now attending the University of Chicago Police Leadership Academy, and he will graduate next month. We will have 4 of our commanders going to the Senior Management Institute for Policing at Harvard, which is put on by the Police Executive Leadership Program, and we send at least 1 candidate to every session of the Washington, D.C. Metro Police Leadership Academy. This allows our commanders to meet with people in similar positions from around the country, and in many instances, like the D.C. program, from around the world to trade ideas. Technology, we'll talk more about Axon specifically and what we're doing with Flock and how that folds into our real-time information center. And also, we are preparing to unveil a new violent crime strategy, risk terrain modeling, and we'll explain briefly why we chose that, and that dovetails directly into compliance with Jensen Hughes. So our Axon body 4 cameras, they're the latest cameras from Axon. They have features that the old one did not. They can be self-activated. They can be activated remotely by a supervisor or eventually by our real-time information center. As you can see there, we'll play the video real quickly. Our Taser 10 will explain the benefit of having a weapon like that that is effective from 45 feet. But also, when we learn, we're also utilizing virtual reality training so that we can do more training, we can do it remotely. We're in the process of training drone pilots right now for our Skydio drones, which work through Axon, and we are soon going to be transitioning to a new records management system that is produced by Axon, and that will dovetail pretty perfectly into what our district attorney wants to evaluate in terms of utilizing AI to make sure that things like discovery are done completely. And we are also utilizing the My90 citizen survey system, so we're getting some feedback on how people feel about what they're seeing. And if you want to play that video real quickly. It's always good when you see over time these numbers going up and not down. But it's very important that we get this type of feedback. It's anonymous. People choose to participate or not participate, and whatever feedback they give us, again, we have no way of identifying them. But it's important to us that we work this into our management of the department. And we'll just back up. I'm going to go back up to the Taser 10. The significance of the Taser 10 is that it allows us to engage from a much further distance. Instead of a maximum of 21 feet, it's now a maximum of 45 feet, and now we have 10 shots instead of 1 in case we don't initially make the connection we need. And we've eliminated the dry stun option because that simply has no place in modern policing. Flock, everyone's heard about our Flock cameras. Incredibly successful program, and under the grant funding that we've received to build our real-time information center is also going to allow us to add 31 more flock ALPR cameras. And also, we will be bringing Raven gunshot detection to the city of Wichita for 4 square miles that was determined through 5 years of data to be where we're seeing the greatest concentration of gunfire. And just to give you some idea, you know, there's some negative comments out there about this. This is Raven gunshot detection. We have tested this for 2 years. We have proven that it works. We've worked with this company to make sure we're seeing an 86% success rate right now. But just an interesting figure, the University of Chicago Crime Lab, when they looked at the system that Chicago just took down against the wishes of the majority of the public, they were able to say that they believe that gunshot detection will reduce fatal shootings by 4%. And that means in a city our size, that's approximately 4.6 lives that could be saved each year in the city of Wichita. That number was about 80 for the city of Chicago. So we're really excited about this. We're very grateful to council and the city manager for supporting this. These are the challenges we'll continue to face: is technology, resources, and response. We are adding to the department as quickly as we can. Recruitment is going extremely well, but it takes time. It takes 6 months in the police academy. It takes a couple months to recruit and hire people, process that application, and then 6 months in the academy, and then at least 4 months of field officer training. But we are committed to rebuilding the trust in the community and increasing that trust. We think we've done a lot of things in the last 2 years to do that. So thank you.
Thank you again, Chief Sullivan. Next, we have Sharon Ditgraf, Chief Deputy City Attorney for the City of Wichita.
Good afternoon. I'm here to speak just briefly about the City Prosecutor's Office. The Prosecutor's Office works in partnership with the Wichita Police Department. Our goal is to help establish a safe and secure environment. Generally, the Prosecutor's Office is responsible for the prosecution of the majority of misdemeanor crimes and traffic offenses that occur within the city limits of the City of Wichita. Approximately 35,000 cases are filed each year in municipal court. Unlike the district attorney's office, most of the charging in municipal court is done by the actual police officers. Our office does review crimes for domestic violence and DUI. Most other charges are police-laid charges. The court has limited jurisdiction. We can only prosecute misdemeanor offenses, meaning that the maximum penalty is 1 year and $2,500. We are allowed some concurrent jurisdiction with felony charges, those being DV, DUI, petty theft. We do have a number of cases where the cases don't necessarily meet the DA's charging guidelines. We may, in many cases, review those cases and go ahead and file those as misdemeanors in municipal court. We are a quick jurisdiction court. We don't have jury trials. The defendant can get a jury trial if it is appealed to district court. My staff continues to handle those cases when they are appealed to district court. Types of offenses: we prosecute any violation of a municipal court ordinance. They range from traffic offenses, your lower level criminal offenses, weapons violations, and then we have a number of specialty dockets, housing code violations, environmental court, nuisance, tall grass and weeds. We have a number of diversion programs that help assist offenders from keeping criminal convictions on their records. The programs allow the offenders to complete programs that, ranging from alcohol, family counseling, petty theft classes. If they are successful in completing those programs, then the charges are ultimately dismissed. Challenges, I think as Chief Sullivan indicated, We are seeing an increase in property theft, especially in retail theft. I think our numbers have increased from a filing standpoint because cases are being cleared. There's also been a number of new businesses that have come to Wichita who have been absolute, we want the cases prosecuted, and we are evaluating those cases and prosecuting them. Certainly, I am sounding like a broken record, increased substance abuse, mental health, those are all challenges for everyone on this panel. The inability to maintain attorneys. Mr. Bennett and I go after the same people. His cases are sometimes a little more exciting than mine are, but certainly I'm trying to keep qualified people, just attorneys. There are not attorneys. The core of individuals that we used to pull from are all new attorneys. They're not coming to Wichita, so certainly that will continue to be a challenge for our office.
Thank you, Sharon. Next up, we have Courtney Carpenter, Chief Probation Officer for Municipal Courts in the City of Wichita.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Courtney Carpenter, Chief Probation Officer for the City of Wichita Municipal Court. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the court's initiatives aimed at reducing recidivism, addressing the growing needs of mental health, substance use, and to include the challenges of fentanyl. Some of our current initiatives that we have at Municipal Court, I want to talk about our 2 therapeutic courts. We have a drug court program. It's a problem-solving court that operates under a specialized model in which there's a judge, a prosecutor, defense attorney, probation officer, and a treatment provider, which is currently ComCare. And we just recently implemented a case manager into that team. They work together to help nonviolent offenders find restoration and recovery and become productive citizens in our community. In 2022, we had 0 people recidivate for 1 year, which is pretty good for our drug court program this year. Our next one is our mental health court. It's another specialized docket designed to address the unique needs of those mentally ill offenders charged with violations of city code. Again, it includes a partnership between the judges, defense attorneys, probation officer, ComCare Scopes program, and also has a case manager. The case manager assists them to get their medications that they need, get them to the treatment, and help them address any other needs that they might have. Again, we had a 0% recidivism rate in 2022 for this too. We also have what's called a day reporting center, or DRC. It's a non-residential alternative to incarceration through intensive treatment and supervision for offenders with misdemeanor or low-level offenses. In addition to the supervision of the day reporting center, it provides offenders who have been sentenced to municipal court to utilize the DRC to provide substance abuse treatment, batterers intervention program, for indigent defendants. They also do urine testing, and they also have a case manager. And a new addition that we added that the DRC had seen some concerns was we added a case manager to help with a dual diagnosis. So they have one that's just specialized to help with those that have been diagnosed with mental health and some substance use issues. Municipal Court also has a Wichita intervention program. It's to comply with the city ordinance, which requires attendance of a drug and alcohol information program for offenders, for offenses that require 48-hour incarceration. So they go to a hotel and they stay in the hotel for the 48 hours. They do nonstop treatment all weekend long, and our recidivism rate for that was also less than 6% last year. A new program that was initiated was we have the Wichita Area Restoration Program. It's a WARP program. It offers 3 services. It's a court clerical staff will help pull driving record and highlight what is holding your driver's license. They assist if there are suspensions in Wichita or Sedgwick County Traffic Court, the driver has a manifest hardship. They just assist in filing the filing fee, fine, and forgiveness motion. And if the suspensions are in the Wichita Municipal Court, staff will help the motion immediately and take them to the right office of where they need to go. this month, I guess, not even last month, it's not, October isn't over, we've had 190 people that have visited the WARP office just this month, which is a huge increase from last month, which in September was only 70. So we've really been ramping up the WARP program this last month. Challenges that we're facing in probation, it's a broken record at this point by the time I got up here, but our probation office is currently facing significant challenges of managing individuals with both substance use and mental health issues, particularly as the fentanyl has become a major driver of our opioid crisis. Many probationers with substance use disorders also have co-occurring mental health issues. Most of our challenges are lack of treatment providers or substance use providers that can also handle the co-occurring disorders. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Courtney and all of the panelists. Really appreciate all the information that we received. We still have almost an hour left, and this will now be an opportunity for council members as well as commissioners to ask questions to any of the panelists regarding all this data that we just received, as well as the challenges faced by each of the different departments. So we'll kick it off to commissioners as well as councilors.
Right in the middle here. Man, you guys figured out how to keep it to where the politicians don't speak, right? Over an hour presentation here. One of the things I think that really keeps me up at night is mass shootings, specifically school shootings that we see. I know you guys have had coordination across the local governments, also with USD 259. Could you speak a little on that and what some obstacles are and what we could help you guys assist with any of these drills or any of the plans that you guys got to address mass shootings?
It's something we talk about every day. We spoke about it at yesterday's ComStat, spoke about it this morning call. The trend that we see is you see large gatherings like parties, specifically Halloween parties right now, where someone unfortunately puts it on social media and people show that they don't want showing up, and then when they're denied access, you run into a problem. So it factors into the way that we are policing Old Town. Thus far, we've been successful in reducing the amount of gun violence in Old Town by having a more stable deployment, more stable supervision, and having a deployment plan. But on top of that, we encourage our supervisors to look at the CAD screen. We talked to Laura about this yesterday, so that when we see parties on the screen, especially those involving young people, juveniles, that we can artificially push it up on the priority list to make sure we get out there and get on top of it as quickly as possible. We had a bad incident last weekend at a Halloween party, and I'm trying to remember the street name, but it could have gone very badly if we hadn't gotten there quicker. So, but in terms of active shooter, that's one of the things that I really want to thank the Director of Emergency Management. I convened a meeting, I guess about 9 months now, with all of the community partners, and the director has taken that project from on in terms of training. There have been multiple tabletop exercises. She's moving us along so that in 2025 we'll have our first live exercise. The problem that I saw when I arrived here is that the agencies were training in a vacuum. They weren't training together, meaning sheriff wasn't training with police and vice versa. We weren't training with our law enforcement partners outside of the Wichita. We weren't training with EMS, which is a major problem in the fire department. So now we are all training together as one team so that we will be prepared. But it is a long process. And in terms of us internally, we're just making sure that we have the right equipment. We have we have officers with the right firearms training, enough body bunkers, helmets. We've increased our ballistic protection, making sure that equipment is on the street, ready to go, so it can be deployed very quickly. The problem is training with the public is very difficult, because you must be very difficult, especially when you're talking about children. You can do more harm than good by traumatizing them if you have training exercises that are too severe. But we have a fantastic partnership with USD 259. We had that unfortunate incident where deputy shot the individual that had shot his partner. And the one thing that, maybe the only thing I could say, the positive that from such a terrible incident was you saw the coordination between 259 and police and sheriffs, and we were getting the message out very quickly. Parents knew where to come, where to pick up their children from. So I think we're moving in a good direction. But the most important thing I can say about that is an active shooter is always going to be prevented by somebody in the public. You're going to be, you know, the people that are in your sphere of influence, and you know if someone is suddenly talking differently, acting differently, suddenly is interested in firearms, someone who is Googling active shooters. Every incident like that that has been disrupted more often because a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker called law enforcement and said, I think something's not right. So how our elected and appointed officials can help us is constantly getting that message out. Don't be afraid, you're not being a rat. You could be saving someone from a lifetime in prison by getting us involved. We have a great partnership with the FBI in terms of if we have any type of threat that comes into our schools, any type of threat at all, we make sure to notify them and we investigate it together. And they entered into a national database, so they're comparing that threat to see if they have anything else similar or matching. But as we go into this election, I don't think any of us could be too vigilant in terms of things like that. So communication is key. That communication is really good here among law enforcement, but we have to constantly stress to the public that we want to know. Nothing is too small to call us. We want to investigate those things. The worst thing that can happen is that we find out that it's just someone, you know, they think they were being funny or whatever. We investigate every single school threat along with USD 259. We take every single one of them serious, even if it is just kids talking. But we do that with every threat that comes into us.
Thanks, Mayor and Chairman. I had a couple specific questions to the presentations. First, to DA Bennett, I saw the AI piece. You talked about maybe using that in the future. With that, do we trust AI to accurately determine what's in the videos, and will there be human verification to that?
Yeah, so I'm not promoting any particular AI. I'm just saying it's something that needs to be explored. And so I would tell you that AI will never be a substitute for a set of human eyes looking at something, drafting a report, etc. But if AI could, pardon me, give a summary of a 15-minute interaction between a law enforcement officer and a witness in a benign setting, something that wouldn't have probably generated a report. But just so we know, you know, the last time Joe Smith was contacted by law enforcement, he was a witness to a car wreck. Okay, well, 3 weeks later, he's a suspect in a rape. You know, is there anything relevant there? I don't know, but I'd rather have the information than not have the information. And so that's an example. AI that could go back and search. I mean, what does AI do? AI searches databases in a moment's notice, you know, tens of millions of documents, et cetera. So if I had an AI-capable software that could search the entire database of the WPD, Derby, you know, anybody in the area, ultimately at some point, I think 10, 20 years from now, there'll be some sort of a software that'll search every database in the state or nation for an individual. So when law enforcement's dealing with them, when they provide me the reports, I'll know the scope of law enforcement's interaction. My point is, you're asking one detective who's got a deadline and got a guy in custody, needs to get him to my office and present it to me tomorrow. To do all of that, it's not going to happen. And so I think we need to start leaning into the opportunities. I know this, what the AI that we're going to talk about in this working group over the next 18 months will look shockingly different than the AI that whoever comes after me will be looking at 10 years from now. But we got to get on it now. We got to talk about it. And if it's not good enough now, then we need to find out, we need to ask the right questions so that we don't put ourselves in a position to rely too heavily on something that's not going to be able to produce what we need it to produce. But this isn't this first stage discussion, but you know, the time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, right?
Yep.
Well, I don't want the next guy coming down the pike to go, I wish Bennett had done his job 10 years ago and, you know, looked at this. So it's a discussion, not a, we're not doing anything right at the moment. We're talking about it so we can have a fully informed discussion and make the right decisions.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
On the Department of Corrections, looking at the lack of community-based programs to assist right now, is that the Team Justice funds? And if yes and no, what is like specifically needed for that? Maybe we could kind of help bring some groups together.
Thank you for that question. That is the Teen Justice Funds, and the Sedgwick County Department of Corrections is the recipient of grant funding through our advisory board, which is called Team Justice, and that money comes with stipulations from the state of who can apply or which programs they can offer. Specifically, the majority of this fund is for evidence-based practices only, which is a very high bar of practice, training, and fidelity to the model. So we have a hard time having folks ready to give us that level of programming, especially what I would consider grassroots organizations. Professional organizations like mental health programs, things like that, they're accustomed to that. But to ask a grassroots organization to produce and carry out an evidence-based program, it's a pretty big lift. So we have partnered with WSU to help train folks and understand things like grant reporting and things like that, but it's an ongoing process, and we still routinely turn back close to $1 million every year of unspent funds. And if we're able to allocate the funds, the programs are not ready to serve the level of kids that we have in the community needing those services. So the funds go unexpended and return to the state.
I thought, okay. Do those regulations come from federal level down to the state, or is that created at like the Kansas Advisory Group level?
Kansas Advisory Group. You were probably a member of that, I do believe.
I was.
It's from CAG and Kansas Advisory Group and the Department of Corrections and some state law with Senate Bill 367 mandates evidence-based practices, which is a noble cause, but perhaps something lower than that level would be appropriate as well.
Is that, are you advocating on the state level for anything like, because I'm happy to help.
Yes.
One of the things I had a problem with was evidence-based programming, because it normally is based off of one demographic of young people, and that's not most of the folks that we serve.
Right. Yes, that's a consistent recommendation we make through our trade organization as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. My last question specific to what was presented, I guess to everyone is, I've heard, I think 3 different presenters talk about a challenge with attorneys. Has there been any conversation with Washburn to potentially have a Wichita-based site or another college to do that? And if so, also with USD 259 selling off some of their buildings, maybe that could be a location to have that.
Discussions have been in place. They're in their infancy. This is not a small ask. Asking KU or Washburn to have a satellite office down here is not something that's going to take place overnight. It's an ongoing process. We've had a receptive audience, I'll say this, and but it's in its infancy. That being said, the efforts that members in this room have undertaken over the last several years to have a biomedical campus that folks did decades ago, to have KU Medical School have a campus down here, but those historic acts of cooperation between Wichita State, the city of Wichita, et cetera, and KU, for example, and having a presence down here have it's sort of paved the way, I think. You know it can be successful. It has been in other arenas. And so I think that's the door into this conversation. I'm not suggesting, and maybe someday somebody will, but I'm not suggesting that we need a 100-person campus down here. But if we could have a situation where I just know there's a lot of non-traditional students, people who weren't sure they wanted to go to law school, but decided maybe, as in their early 30s that, I think I'd like to do that. I mean, I have somebody who worked for me for 20 years, who used to be a reporter for the Eagle. He did that for 10 years. And my joke is, he always sat in the back of the room going, hell, I can do that. And wanted to go to law school. To do it, though, he had to uproot his family, move them to Topeka for 3 years, and then come back. Well, if you've got a house and a mortgage and kids in school, and that's a lot to ask. And I'm just saying there's got to be a way that we can leverage, a community of 500,000 people down here and suggest that, are there not 10 or 20 people who'd like to do this? And figure out a way to make it work for them, to get them to want to come back home and do something in the law, whether that's be a prosecutor, defense attorney, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I also think there's an opportunity to get some kids from Western Kansas who might be inclined to come here and maybe not go all the way to Topeka, Lawrence. So anyway, but that's my roundabout way of answering your question. Yes, it's ongoing. We're not in any position to make any formal declarations at this point. It's early stages of that discussion, but it's ongoing.
I would add some color that District Attorney and I have met with some regents and had the discussion, and KU in particular is incredibly open to the idea of a satellite location down here. So these conversations are going. When he presents that data, though, it's eye-opening, particularly for people down here and people in Western Kansas. But those conversations have been encouraging so far. So great question. Commissioner Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to talk about the driving while suspended discussion. This has gone back, I'd say, at least 5 or 6, 7 years now. I've been talking about this. And in 2021, we passed Senate Bill 127. I testified in favor of that. I was very involved in that legislation. And that was permissive legislation that dealt with the issue, the idea of, based on hardship, that there was ways to reduce the cost to the person trying to get through that process. And then in 2024, this last session, we passed Senate Bill 500, which allows for some restricted uses of, while you're suspended, you do some restricted driving things for like going to work and taking your kids to school and things like that. I don't know how the numbers are right now, but the last time we checked with the Kansas Department of Revenue, which was about maybe more than a year ago now, they came and actually briefed our commission. We've not checked with the numbers lately, but before Senate Bill 500 was passed, even after Senate Bill 127 had been passed for a couple of years, Wichita still has, or Sedgwick County, they track it by the county, but I think Wichita was primarily the biggest common denominator to what was going on in our part of the state. But more than, they said roughly 50%, or around 50% of the driving while suspended licenses had occurred in Sedgwick County. And the folks that are in that situation, a lot of those folks have a lot of poverty problems, and they feel like they have no choices to go to work and take care of their kids and go to the grocery store and things like that. So the numbers were staggering. I mean, I think the lowest number I ever saw was around 70,000 in Sedgwick County. I saw numbers up over 100,000, which means, do the math, maybe 1 out of every 4 or 5 people driving on the streets potentially is driving on a suspended license. Presumptively, probably without insurance, because they can't legally drive. They're doing this out of desperation, and if they get caught, there was a forever look back, which again was dealt with somewhat in Senate Bill 500. Having said all that, where are we as Wichita? You guys talked about about driving while suspended at least a couple times today. What's going on in Wichita? Are we exercising Senate Bill 127, or the provisions of that, trying to help people in poverty? And what are we doing with Senate Bill 500? Are things beginning to change here in Sedgwick County?
I can talk about what court is doing. We're doing the Wichita Intervention, or Wichita Area Restoration Program. It's WARP is what we're calling it. We're getting people in that haven't had a license, seeing what is suspending them, why it's suspending them, and what we can do just to assist them and get them there. I don't know what the numbers are and who's gotten their license back, but I do know that we saw a jump just by promoting it in 1 month from 70 to, I think it was 119 or something like, I can't remember, over 100. So they're getting there, they're getting the word out, they're coming to see what's going on. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers of who's gotten their license back, but we're trying to get them in there and find out.
The court has also started the processes from the first Senate bill regarding allowing people to reduce the fines and court costs. There are forms that they can fill out that goes directly to the judge. The administrative judge makes those decisions. We have expanded our driving while suspended diversion program, which helps people keep those convictions off of their records before they get into trouble where there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 and then they end up getting revoked. We have not made the changes yet to the ordinances regarding the latest Senate bill, since those don't take effect until January 1st, but those are in the process. So we will be in compliance with the final Senate bill.
I'm really glad to hear about 127 being implemented finally. There are people who testified, and I actually helped them testify. I've actually attended the court here in the City Hall. People who actually had to quit their jobs because of the penalties under the driving while suspended. They were in the process of paying off fines, and yet there was no grace to them whatsoever, even through hardship and poverty. It was heartbreaking to see what's been going on in Kansas. But the state's biggest problem has been in Sedgwick County, and I would argue maybe probably Wichita. May I ask a second question? Okay. I want to go to Chief Sullivan. So, I know during the last major campaign for the city of Wichita, one of the talking points was we're over 100 police officers down. And Chief, you just mentioned a minute ago that you're making great progress. But I did talk to one of your officers just about a week or two ago, and they said they didn't think that was true. They said that they believe the FTE count, they were only maybe, they said they hired a lot of folks, but they've also lost a lot of folks. That the gain was, they thought was 1 FTE. Please talk about what's the truth regarding what's your status on, what's your deficit in terms of officers attacking that? We're down 100 officers. Where are we today?
Approximately down 40 police officers.
Down 40 now?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to ask a quick question. I'm going to ask a question later on mental health substance use in the jail. I want to ask about some, not pre-trial, but even pre-charge opportunities. DA Bennett and I have talked about some of these things before. Before I get to that, I want to go to Regional Forensic Science Center. And you talked about the backlog now being 900 current toxicology. I want to try to understand a couple things. One, what is the cause of the backlog? How can we help? But I want to more so understand how that impacts the entire system of this backlog and what the impact it is in the community so that we know how we can best assist this.
The 900 backlog is in our drug identification laboratory, not toxicology.
Okay.
Toxicology is caught up now. In the last few months, we finally were able to knock down our backlog to a normal working level. What causes the backlog is just turnover. When people leave, there's, in that section of the laboratory, there's only 4 full-time analysts plus the one that we have on grant for 5 years. So when one person or 2 people leave in a short order of time, it's 25 or 50% of your workforce. But then it takes 6 months to a year to train somebody that you just hired, sort of like you hire somebody that has the skill or education, but they're not contributing to your backlog. So then you just dig yourself in a major hole because cases keep being submitted, obviously, and then we're working cases to meet court dates or rush cases or things like that. So the other cases get pushed to the back of the line.
I see.
So it is with the full-time FTE that we currently have, part of the grant requirements is that he's the only one that performs the OD2A cases, which is the overdose to action cases. And those are cases from death scenes that aren't going to be prosecuted. And as for the CDC to have data for our region so that they can figure out some harm reduction, and it's in conjunction with the health department. So that full-time person's really probably spending half his time on normal criminal cases. So then it just backlog the city and the district court for their cases and law enforcement to be able to finalize their case.
That's helpful. Okay. I'll probably reach back out again and ask some questions. I want to get back to my original question on, Colonel, how many people in the jail are going to return to this community? We already know 2/3 of the individuals in the jail have a mental health or substance use issue, or both. And what do we need to do? These individuals are coming back to our community. What do we need to do while they are in our possession, what even charges, forget about pre-trial, pre-conviction, but what can we do to really try to get more preventative than just reactive before people are coming back to our community? And DA Bennett, we've talked about some of these things too, so I'm open to.
You know, one of the biggest challenges is a lot of times our population, we talked about the jail population being at about 1,200 right now. These are folks that are going to be with us for a little bit typically, but the majority of folks that move through our facility are there for a very short period of time, less than 24 hours. And recognizing those services in a way that we can connect them with services and the number of services that are available to them is the biggest challenge. And this is something that everyone in this room has been working on in the recent years, and having a quote-unquote one-stop shop or a place where community members can go to have services that is reasonable to what they can get to. And so obviously the city and the county have been working towards that, and I think that is going to make a big impact on this community. I'll let the district attorney talk a little bit about it, but we're also talking, you know, we talked a little bit, the chief talked a little bit about ICT, one, and that's, you know, when we reach out on a day-to-day basis on as it relates to calls that we're interacting with folks, that's been a game changer for us too, because we can connect services with folks immediately. And expanding those roles and making those connections more quickly for people that need services is an important thing. And that's, you know, in terms of police services, that's something that's new within the last several years. We also have, we're one of the only facilities in the state, or maybe the only facility in the state, that has mental health services right in the jail. So we have people on staff that work with our population every day. And then connecting with ComCare, we move folks directly from our detention facility right into ComCare services. And so having that good working relationship with ComCare is very important. But I'll kind of go back to kind of a broken record that we've talked about a little bit here, is just maintaining the staff for all these different entities. And one of the things that we've kind of talked about, and again, this kind of bleeds over into everything else that we're doing, is the staff that we have now is young. Because there's been so much turnover over the recent years, so they don't have the depth of experience to manage some of these things. And the chief again talked about it a little bit too, which is training. So one of the things when we talk about challenges is training our staff to recognize and understand how to connect with those services and where they're available. When you have somebody that's new in your staff, and I'm talking a year or two, there's a lot to learn. Being a law enforcement officer is a complex job, and understanding all the things that they can do to help someone sometimes takes some time to evolve. And I'll kind of connect it back, and this may sound a little crazy, but it's pay. And we have to keep our people. And so we've made great strides in maintaining our staff and getting our organizations back to reasonable staffing levels. But maintaining good pay over a long period of time helps us maintain our staff so that we can connect people, again, going back to your original question, with good services.
Can I have a follow-up question or a couple questions regarding that very topic? I think the word was not used, but I would like to start with this topic. It was one of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and that is homelessness. And so you mentioned that a majority of the 1,200 inmates that are in the Sedgwick County Jail usually get out within 24 hours. Can you talk about what's that population? How many do not have an address? You mentioned also that in the state, this is the only jail with a mental health services in-house. So that is something that I think I also heard some comments, just very surprised. I didn't know that either. Can you talk about how this connects with the city of Wichita having obviously a challenge regarding homelessness, and the intention is not to jail people, but what you just told me was there are mental health services in the jail, and then you connect them to ComCare. Can you talk about, I guess, that process and what elevates to that level? And last but not least, this is an overarching topic that I think everyone in this panel has a hand in. Where do you see the multi-agency center being a solution and maybe an added solution to this challenge?
Well, let me first say that a lot of the people that we deal with that have challenges connecting with mental health services are indigent. They can't pay for those services. And that's where community-based services come into play. And those cost money. And there's a lot of resources and funding that needs to take place on the back end so that we can provide a foundation of services for the community that doesn't have a way to pay for it. In general, I'll kind of talk about this, I'll kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but our staff has problems paying for it, and they make a good wage. And that's why we have our own in-house therapist that helps our staff. So again, when I talked about connecting some folks that leave our facility with ComCare, that's physically taking them there. We physically take them there. We will also physically take them to the hospital to connect them with services, and that's part of the conversation that we haven't completely talked about here, but in crisis situations where we need to take members of this community to a local hospital for evaluation. So when I talk about those mental health services, the ones that I would suggest that need the most bolstering is those that are community-based, where it's not an out-of-pocket expense for community members that just can't afford those basic services.
I would say to both of these questions, so when I started my career 30 years ago, cops arrested, prosecutors prosecuted, judges sentenced, and then it wasn't until parole or probation that anyone was paying much attention to things we could do to keep people from recidivating and coming back into the system. We have a better understanding now than we did 30 years ago about maybe the threshold question, which is why are people suffering from addiction and mental health issues? Why is it that 75% of the people in the jail have one of these co-occurring issues? Anecdotally, I can tell you that when we look, childhood trauma, domestic violence being present in the home has a direct corollary to future violence. If you grow up in a house where people beat the hell out of one another all the time, you're probably not going to be a good problem solver when you go out into the workforce. And so there is no panacea, there's no silver bullet, but we are doing things now, I think collectively, and I'm not declaring victory by any means, but we're doing things now that we did not do in the past. Both of these bodies here each gave $2 million to the Child Advocacy Center. They're trying to expand their footprint to add more therapists. Kids who have been sexually and physically abused without any access to therapy and the type of thing that the CAC offers are going to have a harder road to hoe down the road into adulthood. I'm not suggesting they're all going to become criminals or anything like that, but their ability to be successful adults, we know, is impacted. The people in this room have seen to it to adequately fund that facility to try to address that. We have philanthropies in this community, Catholic Charities, Harbor House, and others who work with domestic violence victims. We have at WASAC, I could almost hit him with a baseball from where I'm sitting right now. They work with victims of sexual abuse, more in the adult population. We've got the children's home. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we are doing. It's not just one entity, but the collective that works together that I think is having an impact. But we're nowhere near where we need to be. But what I'm getting at is these are the type of things that impact people before they see the criminal justice system for the first time. The mental health court that's going on in the municipal court, these people who are in on misdemeanors, who have yet to, well, hopefully not graduated to felony level yet. I mean, when you come to my court, to the courthouse, and see Judge Gehring, and I'm standing up in the courtroom, and Gehring's asking me what my recommendations are, it's bad. I mean, I don't have a lot when you get to my level. The way we address this is upstream, downstream, however you want to look at it, before it gets to the district court level where the options are limited. And it's okay when you get out. And I will say too, you asked how many people are getting out in our community. The reality is north of 80 to 90% of the people who go into the penitentiary system are going to get out and rejoin this community. It's a very small group of people, very thin thread, off-grid offenses, homicides, Jessica's Law cases. Other than that, people are going to do their time, they're going to get back out. And so whether they come back out and reoffend and commit new crimes and victimize more of their fellow citizens, or they go back and become productive members of society, I think is going to be impacted by the way we address these things. And the elephant in the room is always going to be the funding stream. Who's going to pay for all this? And when, the sheriff, the EMS, my office, the court system, et cetera, is all run on property taxes, people at some point have said, enough of that. And so that's the other challenge, I would say, for everyone in this room, is to figure out how we're going to continue to adequately fund this, address public safety without people saying, Uncle, I can't take any more property taxes. So if I had a simple solution there, I would sure as hell share it with you, but I don't.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Okay. We had one of the slides earlier talked about DV, domestic violence, being up 25%. I hear a lot of chatter about the batterers intervention program for first time, I believe batterers. There's a couple of different programs up there, up to and including, I think, a 26-week program. That's kind of the gold standard. Are these effective in dealing with domestic violence? And what are some of the obstacles we see towards getting more people into these programs?
So we operate a batterers intervention program, and it's as you described. The challenge is the oversight. The licensed individual to provide oversight for that program is very specific, and the regulations are very narrow from the Attorney General's office. So while we have the providers that we employ to provide the groups for the men and women, and we have good outcomes and we have good participation, it's the oversight, the clinical individual, the licensed master level social worker to provide the oversight is where we don't have any luck in finding somebody. We're the only probation office or community corrections office in Kansas who offers batterers intervention, but we have to contract with the Mental Health Association for our oversight. So that's the biggest challenge that we have.
I would say too, just the cost for defendants to attend the batterers intervention program. However, for us, we have the day reporting center, so our offenders who are able to go to the day reporting center do not pay. So for indigent folks who cannot pay, they can go through the day reporting center, would be our challenge. We don't teach the classes in municipal court.
So we talked about a lot of collaborations between particularly emergency service providers and how we're cross-working together. One that was missing from this conversation was how does that also tie into fire? Often they're first responders at a lot of things. I'm thinking specifically a case or just a fire at West Kellogg. Obviously, there's a lot of problems in West Kellogg motels with public safety. There's a fire that was also in one of these motels as well. And so these individuals also worked as first responders. They see either squatting, fire use charges. We know that squatting has a lot of drug connections as well. And so how are these things tied together? Are we doing it well? Is there something that this body needs to do to help cross-collaboration with fire and making sure that they're included in these public safety conversations as well, because they're often the first responders showing up to a lot of these that could result in also either criminal charges or further complications.
From our perspective, the police department, we get incredible cooperation from the Wichita Fire Department. Even in terms of when we have special events, they'll come out and do enforcement of lunch trucks, food trucks to make sure they're safe. Also, whether there's something in the interior as far as electrical goes. So I think the relationship really couldn't be better. Couldn't ask more than what we get. We collaborate with fireworks. the fire marshal is fantastic here, so, but I think you're absolutely right. We probably could bring them more into the conversation on public safety, because they definitely have a lot to offer, but I know when the Wichita Police Department calls on the fire department, we get nothing but 110%.
Okay, I just have two quick questions. The first one is, many of you have mentioned staffing levels, about retaining staff and keeping them. Do you think it is more salary-based or burnout or both, or is there another missing piece?
I would say for us at the Regional Forensic Science Center, it used to be more, it's probably a combination of both, but it used to be salary-based. I will say, so far since changes with the salaries have occurred over the last 2 years or so, we haven't seen quite as much turnover as we did for the decade before. We were always constantly training people, so our experience is that it's improving. Hopefully it stays that way, but for the last year or two, it's definitely been easier to retain people for us. It's just we're so small, if we lose somebody, it's sometimes 50% or 100% of our lab staff, and then you can't, and then when you have to train somebody, it takes, some programs are 6 months, some are up to 2 years to fully train somebody, and they're not doing any work, and then somebody who is doing work is being pulled off from the bench, we call it, from the lab, to train that person, so they're doing the training and not the casework. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
I would agree that staffing for us was our staffing shortage was primarily driven by the wages. When comparable agency was paying $7 or $8 an hour more, why wouldn't you go do that? Now that that's evened out and we are able to hire staff, like I mentioned earlier, we're not able to fully use them because they can't be trained. Okay. So that puts an extra burden on the folks who are still around. And what we're seeing in our residential programs is everybody's promoted where they can be, so we have no supervisors. Literally, we have 30 or 40% vacancy in our supervisory tier because the people, Colonel talked about, the people who are there are new and very green and not ready to be supervisors yet. So it's constantly evolving. It's a little bit of a whack-a-mole to what we're finding, but it is improving. The wages stabilized a lot.
Awesome, thank you. And my other quick question is, DA Bennett, I'm still trying to process that we have 1,800 attorneys over the age of 60, right? So is there
in the state?
In the state,
Yeah.
but is there a gap of people, not as many people going to law school, and is there something you mentioned that, this idea of maybe moving a satellite location here, just across the board, is there anything else like long-term that we could be looking at that would be beneficial, that we can be working the long game on? So
If we get the Chiefs to come to Wichita, maybe that would get people to, I mean, why is it that so many kids are moving to Kansas City or staying there after they go to KU, K-State, whatever? So what are the factors? Well, so when I went to K-State, a long time ago, yeah, go Cats, it's a big weekend. When I went there, in the dark ages, but I paid $600 a semester, okay? Went to Washburn, it was $2,000. It ain't $600 a semester, and it's not $2,000 a semester to undergrad. So, you could get out, you could work your way through college, you could come out with enough debt that maybe it was a car payment. Now, you go to 4 years of college, it's expensive. And then if you want to go on to, I was talking to our, the DA's association, we have a guy we work with in Topeka, and he's got interns working for him, and he just asked one, what are you paying right now to go to Washburn? And they said, basically, it's about $40,000 a year between tuition and a place to live. And you think, okay, so that's 7 years of post-high school. Come out of undergrad, whatever your debt is, now take on another $120,000 for 3 years. And then, when you're all done, whatever your debt load is, come work in public service. Or come work in Great Bend or Pratt or anywhere west of 81 Highway. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask. And so the numbers of kids going to law school went down. My graduating class 30 years ago was 125, 130. They were having graduating classes of, I don't want to misspeak and be off by a hair and undermine what I'm saying, but under 100 for a number of years. Now, I think they're creeping back up again, but it's tough to get people to want to go on and take on that kind of a debt load, and when they do, to then go into a public sector. So what else can you do? I will say in my side of the world, my manager has worked with me on, the county manager has worked with me on trying to, if I hire somebody who's going to law school, give them an extra $1,000 to help them pay for their move just to come back to Wichita. I mean, it's something as benign or as simple as that. We've talked about offsetting student loans. We can. That's very difficult to do because if we pay it off and then they leave immediately, did you really get your bang for your buck? There are public service loan forgiveness programs, but they usually require 10 years. They're from the federal government. Now, I've had 2 or 3 people who did it. One guy got over $200,000 worth of debt relieved. He stayed with us for over 10 years. About the 11th year, he went into private practice, and he's doing very well now. But I got 10 years out of him, so I guess we got the return on investment. But there are no easy answers for this. It's a tough thing to try to get people to want to come and do. So, but that's what I'm thinking. A law school, at least the presence of one here, would be something tangible we could hope for. So.
Very good. A few more minutes here. Any final questions? Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you very much. And actually, my question may be more for our manager than for forensic science. One of the things that the forensic science briefed today was physical space workforce issues, and we've been recognizing that for some time. We tried to buy a house that was next to the forensic science building, and they wouldn't sell. I know that the biomed facility is going in, and eventually we're going to end up with KU Med moving out of that facility. I'm trying to figure out what our next step is in order to get physical space and workflow for the Forensic Science Center.
I can explain what our current plan is anyways, that we've been working with facilities and the architects on, but like you said, when KU Med moves out, the health department facility may move into the current KU Med, which would vacate that space. And then, since that's already county property, my understanding anyways, and then we are designing a building to be possibly constructed on that site, which is essentially straight across the street from us. It would be essentially another annex, and then we would still have our facility and have the new facility to be able to have a better workflow for the laboratory sections that are essentially using space currently that wasn't originally designed for labs, but we're making it work right now, but because there's, it would improve the workflow to get us our cases done faster and probably safer.
Well, I hadn't heard anything for a little while on that, so I was trying to figure out what we were doing. I'd like to change gears just a little bit. I've heard the DA speak a couple times about discovery and the amount of time that his attorneys spend in discovery and trying to get that to the defense, because if they don't get everything there, then we're going to have problems once it goes to court. So I guess it's a couple-part question. What else can the city of Wichita do, especially their detectives, when they're presenting the information to the DA, to make sure that they have all the information available to have discovery there? And the second part of it is, I know a few years ago when the police chief came on, we had 2 different record management systems, and is that contributing to the discovery problem? Because the city of Wichita had a separate records management system than Sedgwick County.
I don't think this 2 different records management systems are contributing to the issue as much as, candidly, just the influx of new types of discovery. We're dealing with types of discovery we didn't deal with 10 years ago. The number of Axon cameras, the number of, and by the way, the county pays for me to have 2 part-time persons who go in and review all the Axons, so that makes it workable for us. But you know, the cell phone, the amount of information on those cell phones is just staggering, and we have to get that over to the defense attorneys. And you know, I don't want to get too gratuitous here, but the amount of porn on these phones that they're downloading for people, and how much of it there's even child porn and things like that, that I can't just simply give over to the defense attorney. So now we have to figure out a way for them to come look at it. I mean, it's a real headache. So I would say, as to the second part of your question, it's just a function of, if we were all in the exact same system, we'd still have some of these issues. It's just the sheer volume of what we're dealing with.
The RMS system is a problem, but that's not this problem. We are going to the Axon RMS system, which will make it easier for us to put together discovery packages, because all of our technology, as well as all of our reports, will be under one system. But that is, niche is not the problem right now. It's just the amount of data there is and how difficult it is to search it.
But is there something else that your detectives can do to help our DA with the discovery process?
So, Mark, when there's a problem, reaches right out to us, and we are working on that as we speak. Deputy Commissioner, I'm sorry, there you go, Philly. Deputy Chief Easter is working with his commanders to see how we can do a better job. I mean, we haven't had many cases like that, but the one that Mark highlighted was obviously an extremely important case. So we're looking at our current practices and seeing how we can improve them while we wait for the new RMS system to come online.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Any final questions from the council?
Just one or two quick ones. What's the current staffing levels at dispatch, and are they going up?
Is this, are you meaning 911?
911, yes, sir.
Tom, I'll let you, current staffing levels at 911.
We are over 100% now. We're overstaffed. So we are hiring ahead. The commission approved 10 additional positions for 2025. So we went ahead and staffed to that level and picked it up early. So we're actually over 100% now.
Okay, yeah, the second one is, where are we at with the suggestions from the CJ Lofton Task Force? Have they mostly been implemented? Are we feeling good at where we are with what we've learned?
The majority of those have been adopted. There are some logistics related to hardware installations in the detention facility that continues to be a challenge, but the substantial recommendations like additional ICT-1, social workers at 911, body cameras for staff and corrections, things like that have been implemented. There's probably 5 or so that are still in progress.
Any final questions from commissioners? Well, thank you to the council, to the commission, to the panelists. I will just wrap up from the city end, and I'll have Chairman Beatty wrap up from the county end. I really appreciated all this data. We didn't have enough time to talk about all the different topics that everyone is interested in, but I did hear resounding agreement that staffing continues to be an issue in whichever department. But I'm really grateful to hear from Chief Sullivan that we are now 40 officer shortage versus 100 from last year. So 40 to 100 I see as an improvement. I also appreciated hearing that co-occurring mental health and substance abuse continues to be a major challenge from the client side. And so it poses a challenge for the providers. And so, again, the multi-agency center is one of those many solutions that we as a city have focused on collaboratively. And then last but not least, I have seen that from the data, violent crime is down, but property crime continues to be a challenge, and shoplifting is something that we didn't talk about, that I would really like to have a follow-up regarding shoplifting and how that can work more collaboratively, because I have heard from residents who have seen people shoplifting, and some store employees will not intervene out of safety and protocol from those businesses. So what are ways that we can encourage businesses, residents, and the legal system to really help curb those numbers, because to me that is a sharp increase. So those are my final thoughts on this, and I am very appreciative that we've now had 2 en bancs in the year of 2024 between 2 bodies, one regarding cultural arts and parks, and then this one on public safety. And I'm just really grateful that the county came over to the city side, and the city also continues to be at the table. So thank you very much.
Very good, Mayor. Councilman, did you?
Yeah, Chairman, just real quick, not a question, but I would love to work with you all on eviction court. It's still a concern of mine and folks who just continue to receive the short end of the stick, not because of staff, but because of folks like Lou McGinnis and the efforts that he has to evict so many people in Sedgwick County. So it's just something I would love to work with you all on and see what we can do to help people out.
Certainly, absolutely. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you again to the City of Wichita, Bob, and for being gracious host again twice, letting us come over and have a conversation. Thank you to everyone that came today. These people here represent a broad, very complex system, and they do not succeed. You don't succeed without each other. This system is very integrated in many ways, and our job, and I think we know our job, is to make sure you have the resources you need to do your jobs. And that's why venues like this and conversations like this and exploratory discussions like this are incredibly important. So on behalf of Sedgwick County, I just want to thank you, all of you, from the City of Wichita to Sedgwick County, the courts, thank you for what you do for this community. There's a lot of things we can be really proud about. There's a lot of good progress being made. There's still significant challenges, and we'll make progress together. And I think that you have the commitment from Sedgwick County that we'll always be at the table to help and to have these discussions. So I'm very proud of the work that's happening and very encouraged about where we're going. So thank you again for having us over here today. We'll finish up our business here, and I'll move to receive and file all this discussion today.
Second.
A motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Meitzner. Commissioner Dennis. Commissioner Howell.
Aye.
Commissioner Lopez. Chairman Beatty.
Aye. Thank you again, everybody, for having us, and thank you for coming today.